In the previous video lesson, you learned about how to calculate cost per point and cost per thousand. The question now is how to apply this analysis. This is what we call cost efficiency analysis. After you finish this video lesson, you will be able to understand the working relationship between a media planner and a media buyer, understand the typical applications for CPM or cost per thousand and CPP or cost per point analysis. You're going to learn how to understand how to initiate a conversation with a television station or media in general. You're going to understand the media terminology associated with these media efficiencies, and you're going to understand how to make media decisions to deliver a marketer's message in the most cost-efficient way. Now, let's start. There are three typical applications for cost per point and cost per thousand analysis. Scenario A media planner sets a market CPM or CPP to plan media budgets and media buys. Scenario B, as a negotiating mechanism between a buyer and a media rep. Scenario C, as an evaluating analysis to compare the efficiencies of a media vehicle or between media vehicles. The CPM and CPP can be set by day part, by market, by demo, and by quarter. So let's take each one by one. Okay. In scenario A, the media planner sets a market CPM and CPP to plan budgets and media buys. What does this mean? The relationship between a media planner and a media buyer can be very symbiotic. I can tell you when I was a buyer, the media planners consulted our buying team constantly to understand the media rates to buy television and radio airtime. In our time, in my time, it was broadcast. And these were expressed in terms of CPM and CPP in order to plan budgets. For the media buyer, this is very important that the media planner estimates the budgets accurately. So we had, or the buyer had, sufficient money to be able to buy efficiently and reach the audience levels stipulated in the media plan. Remember that the audience levels stipulated in the media plan respond to the client's business objectives and how much exposure is necessary to achieve these objectives. See how the chain works? The client shares with the planner what they want to achieve. The planner plans accordingly to these objectives and how much exposure is going to take. The planner prepares the buying briefs accordingly. The planner shares the buying brief with the media buyer, and then the buyer goes execute onto the buying brief. So this is the way that I experienced my own buying career. And the best way I can explain it is that the planner was closest to the client. Sometimes, in the case of J. Walter Thompson, the planner was even located in the same city where the client was headquartered. And our buying team, the buyers, were located geographically closer to the markets or the spot markets in our case that we bought. Because of this constant media negotiating activity, the buyer really knows the market conditions and the media rates to be able to assist the media planner to estimate budgets. It is the media planner's job to establish the idea exposure levels to reach the client's goals. For example, if the client wants to sell X% more product than the previous year, that's a business objective, the media planner estimates how much advertising exposure to the target is necessary. These exposure estimates are calculated in terms of how many ratings and impressions, how much reach and frequency, how much coverage, and what target composition will be necessary to achieve those goals. After the media planner determines how many rating points and impressions to reach the client goals are ideal, they estimate the exposure and budget necessary to achieve those goals based on the recommended CPP and CPM supplied by the buyer given the market conditions and the time of the year, such as flight or campaign dates, or the quarter the buy will run. For example, let's say that a media planner estimated that in order for the client to sell 10% more product than the previous quarter, it will take the exposure of 150 points or rating points per week in prime time for that demo in a given spot market. So let's write that here. 150 points or rating points per week in prime. Now, the media planner now will take the media buyer's recommendation, or let's say a cost per point of $1,375 per point, or cost per point in prime time. Remember, I'm making these numbers up for illustration. So let's say that the buyer said back to the planner, it's going to take $1,375 cost per point in prime for that particular time frame that we're going to execute this by. So now this is the planning cost per point. Now, the media planner can estimate this budget by multiplying the points it's going to take times the cost per point. Right? Because if it's 150 points per week and it's going to take $1,375 for each rating point that you buy in prime time, now the media planner can estimate this budget by doing this multiplication. 150 points estimated by the planner in prime multiplied times the estimated 1,375 cost per point supplied by the media buyer, and this multiplication gives you a budget of $206,250 in prime time per week for that particular market. In other words, for the client to achieve their business goal of selling 10% more, it will take 150 rating points per week in prime time at a cost per point of $1,375 per point for a total estimated budget of $200,250 per week. Remember that all these numbers are a result from analysis done by the media planner and the media buyer, and relative to each market. Okay, let's go to scenario B. As a negotiating mechanism between a buyer and a media rep. Now, once the buyer receives the media buy from the media planner with how many rating points and impressions to buy at an established cost per point and cost per thousand that will work in the market given the market conditions, the buyer uses them as a negotiation compass. The media, right, sends rates or avails at the media buyer's request. These unnegotiated rates will not necessarily meet the cost per point and the cost per thousand established in the buy, because the media doesn't know what the buyer is planning, right? So hence, why the buyer needs to negotiate the rates. The media buys established cost per point, cost per thousand will help guide that negotiation. Keep in mind that the analysis can be done in cost per point or cost per thousand, either one. Because not all media is measured in rating points, cost per thousand or CPM is the universal measure for all media. For ratings measured media, such as radio and TV, the analysis can be done using cost per point or cost per thousand, either or. Now let's go to scenario C. As an evaluating analysis to compare the efficiency of a media vehicle or between media vehicles. Cost per point and cost per thousand can be set, again, by day part, prime, early fringe, etc., by market, one market versus the other by demographic. Remember the example we used to calculate how many hours of prime time and programming options there were to evaluate. Actually, there were 132 hours to be exact. Now, the media buy establishes to buy prime time. And I'm going to use this example again, just to refresh your memory. So let's say that a spot market, and we've already done in a previous video, we did this example, but let's do it again just to refresh your memory so that you understand the importance of this analysis. So let's say that this particular media budget is in this particular spot market that has 6 stations or 6 TV stations. So the spot market being bought has 6 television stations. And by the way, prime time is considered Monday through Saturday, 8 to 11, and Sunday. These are typical day part hours, and Sunday, 7 to 11 p.m. So if you add the hours here, these are 22 hours of weekly primetime programming that runs Monday through Saturday, 8 to 11. That's 3 hours per day times 6 days. So alone here is 18 hours. And you have the additional Sunday, because it's Monday through Sunday, which is 7 to 11. So this is another 4 hours here. Okay? So consider that when you add this and then multiply times 6 stations, right? These are 132 primetime programming options to consider, because that's 22 times 6, that's a total of 132 primetime hours that you need to evaluate alone. Now, keep in mind that very rarely a buy is only prime time. Imagine if you have other day parts. Now, let's stick to this. If you do not have a guide to put all these programs, 132 to be exact, on the same scale, how will you evaluate 132 programs, each with a different rating points? So this is where the media buys established CPM comes in. This established CPM and/or CPP will guide the negotiation and is the parameter to weigh each programming option against each other. Remember, this is a very competitive business and stations are extremely competitive with each other. Now let's go back to the chart that we're working with. So let's start with CPM. Now, you did all the math here. You already have calculated CPMs and CPP for all the programming on the chart. Assume that this chart are the avails that stations have sent you and that you're doing your cost efficiency analysis. So let's introduce here that the media planner, so now we're dealing with planning cost per point. So let me erase here for a minute so that we start. So let's say here that the planner, in their conversation with the buyer, decided that for that particular market, the planning CPM is $1.07. So basically what this means is that it's going to take $1.07 per every 1,000 people that you reach in those. You cannot go over that. What this means is that the media buyer cannot go over in their negotiation $1.07 for every 1,000 people in the programs they're considering buying. This is your guide. This is the guide of negotiation. It's like when you are going to buy a car and you establish a budget, right? You negotiate the car based on the budget and payments that you can afford. Now, You have 6 different programs with rates, audience deliveries, etc., and you have to compare how cost efficient they are, or if you have to negotiate them to make them cost efficient given the planning cost per thousand. So let's look at this. You already did your rate divided by CPM thousands analysis. So now, as you calculated the CPM as the avails show by taking rate dividing by the impressions, remember that those impressions you have to divide by 1,000, so you take the 3 zeros out, and you have to do that for all the programs on the chart. So you already did 2. Now, you have to look at which particular programs are at $1.07, right at or below, and if they're right at or below, once you do the math, then these you don't have to negotiate. But any program that is above $1.07 per thousand, these need to be negotiated. So the question is, by how much, right? So from this chart, you see that anything in green, like for example, American Idol and Survivor, when you divide the 15,000, right, divided by, this were the impression delivery, 14,140,000, but if you divide this by 1,000, then it becomes 14,140 because there's 14,140 thousands in 14,140,000. Now, if you see on the chart, everything in green, when you do this multiplication for American Idol, the CPM for this show is $1.06 for every 1,000 that you're reaching. Now, let's take a program that is inefficient so that we can start working on that one. Now, the next program is inefficient is, you take another color so that you can distinguish. Sunday Night Football. So Sunday Night Football has a CPM, a rate of $11,000 per every 30 seconds, or depending on the unit, for every 30 seconds that you're going to place in Sunday Night Football is going to cost you $11,000. And the delivery here is 7,750,000, but again, divided by 1,000, you have to scratch the 3 zeros. Now, when you do the division, 11,000 divided by 7,750, the CPM here is $1.42, right? So now, what we have to do here is, okay, so how much do we need to negotiate this to in order to get it to efficiency? So here, what you need to do now is you take the planning CPM, which is $1.07, that's your planning CPM, and you have to multiply it by the delivery, which is 7,750, right? So when you actually do this multiplication, the resulting rate is 8,292.50. So we know that this rate needs to be negotiated from the 11,000 to 8,292. So this is technically, in order to be able to afford a 30-second unit, given your planning cost per point, this is where you have to negotiate it. That does not mean that the station is obligated to sell it at that rate. they may have the demand on that commercial inventory and the cost is higher, but the rate at which the buyer can buy, given their planning CPM, dictates their rate offer and their available choices. Again, it's like negotiating a car. You may like a car outside of your budget range, but you make an offer anyway to see if it is accepted. This is why it's called a negotiation. Now, do the same for the rest of the inefficient programs in the charts. And remember that you're going to find the answers in the full lesson PowerPoint for this module. Let's do the same for CPP. Let's say that the planning cost per point, let me write it here, the planning cost per point is $1,360, right? That's for every rating point that you're going to buy. Again, look at all 6 different programs with rates and do the same analysis, but now with rating points. So now, you calculate the cost per points as the avails show by taking the rate and divide it by the rating points. And do that for all the programs in the chart, as you see in the PowerPoint. Now, step 2, you have to analyze which programs are at the planning cost per point of 1,360, if they're right at or below the 1,360. So what this means is you don't need to negotiate these, but any program that is above the 1,360 per point, they need to be negotiated. But the question is, by how much? So let's say, again, Sunday night football. Let's put it here on the board. And for Sunday night football, you had $11,000 rate for every commercial insertion, and you divide it by the 6.1 rating point that it delivers, and your real cost per point here is $1,803.27. So this is what you need to go negotiate, because it's more expensive than the allocated $1,360 per point that your buy allows. So now what you have to do in order to know at what rate you need to negotiate it is that you take your planning cost per point of $1,360 allocated, and then you multiply it times the rating delivery, which is 6.1. So 1,360 planning cost per point times 6.1, and then it equals $8,296. So this is the efficient rate. So now the question becomes, how do we use cost per point or cost per thousand to evaluate cost and efficiencies to negotiate? It depends what the buying brief advises and uses. Either way, the costs should be relative to each other, since remember, ratings are calculated from the impressions delivered by the program or media vehicle. So let's see in this example, right? So if you take Sunday night football, let me erase this really quick. If you take Sunday night football, and let's put your planning CPM here. Let's put planning CPP here. Planning CPM was $1.07. Planning CPP was 1,360, right? So if the media by planning CPM established to reach every 1,000 people for $1.07, then you calculate the efficient rate, which is $1.07 times the thousands delivered by Sunday Night Football, which are 7,750 equals 8,292 with 50 cents. So this is your efficient rate. On the other hand, if you use the media buy planning cost per point of $1,360, right? $1,360 per rating point, then you calculate the planning cost per point of 1,360 times the rating that it delivers, which is 6.1. So here, the rate is $8,296. Do you see that the resulting rate using CPM is 8,292.50, and the resulting rate using planning cost per point is $8,296. They may be a little off by a couple of dollars or even cents, but either one can be used by the planner and the buyer to negotiate rates with the media. Now, do the same for the rest of the inefficient programs in the charts, and always remember that you're going to find the answers in the full lesson PowerPoint for this module.